You couldn't have asked for more drama than that on the first weekend of the World Cup. It was unpredictable at times, and the first few upsets actually came through, and there were some controversy as well that we need to just have a look at. For now, we'll just look at some of the highlights of some of the real winners over the weekend and some of the people who lost out. And by lost out, it's not just merely losing the game, it's just where people kind of now find them in the tournament and where they just missed the opportunities that were presented to them. First off, I want to start by just crediting some of the smaller unions. I must say it was very impressive and lovely to watch how the Namibian team, the Chile team, and uh, the Romanian teams actually just went full out. They played their hearts out, and it was brilliant to see. I loved the way that they play, and all credit to them. Let's start at the opening game. The France-New Zealand game was the absolute ideal start to the World Cup. It was intense, and the French were impressive, although they weren't clinical. What was a bit of a worrying sign, however, was how there was so much senseless kicking in the game. At times it was 4 or 5 kicks just going back and forth. No real intent, no real plan to it, more a hope than anything else. In the end, the better team won, and France deserves that first victory of the World Cup. Most of the games for the rest of the weekend went according to script, but there were two that didn't, and those are the ones that I'm talking about are, of course, the England versus Argentina game and the Wales versus Fiji game, which I think could have gone differently. Another game that could have caused an upset actually was the Australia versus Georgia game. Yes, I know Georgia isn't on the same level as Australia, but they've been on the up, and Australia have just been having the worst time ever. Georgia had a golden opportunity to actually cause an upset, but the occasion was just too big, and they didn't pitch up on the day. Let's start off by first looking at the biggest losers, and then we'll look at the biggest winners. And we're going to start with that one first. In the third place, I will put Georgia. They had that opportunity to really extend the Wallabies' losing streak that had been going for uh, most all that have gone for all of 2023, and I think in total it's 280 something days that they haven't had a win at all. But they just couldn't do it on the day. New Zealand coming in second place. They they really had their flashes of the All Blacks that used to be, with the tries at the start of each of the two halves. But apart from that, there wasn't a lot of All Black rugby being played. If you literally have a look at the players, one by one, you have a look at the skill levels, you look at the technical ability, they have everything that they need to be world beaters. But there is one thing that they are actually lacking. It feels like over the past 2 years, they've steadily lost that very unique All Blacks culture. That pride in wearing the All Black jersey, that air of confidence, the togetherness of the team, and the fighting spirit to make just basically every New Zealander proud. It doesn't look like it's there. So if they can have a bit of a culture reset in that team and they can get back to that, they can get back to their best, in my opinion. Then we get to the biggest losers of the weekend. Definitely Argentina. Argentina had such a wonderful chance to actually put England away and compound the misery uh, of the English team that they've suffered for most of the past couple of months. But they just didn't take advantage of it. They allowed England into the game. England played fairly well, don't get me wrong, but uh, I think Argentina really missed an opportunity. And they were really bad in terms of their ball handling. They actually equaled the record for the most handling errors in a game in in the World Cup ever. So, and that was 14. So that was a bit of an embarrassing one to actually do in a crucial game like that. On the winner's side, we don't really need to talk about France and South Africa that much. They put up great performances as was expected. So there's not a lot to get into there in particular, I think. Australia finally won a game in 2023, and it will be a good platform for them to build from, even though it was against weaker opposition. England were, however, vastly improved, and they've played much better than they've played for most games over the past 2 years. They weren't perfect, but for a side that has lost as often as they have and have struggled as much to just get that winning culture back, I think they did a pretty good job. What really set them up for success was the way that they defended. They were very aggressive in that, and that laid the foundation for them to actually kick on and get towards a win, in my opinion. My two biggest winners, however, over the weekend, for slightly different reasons, were Wales and Fiji, actually. They were in the game of the weekend, and yes, I know Fiji lost, but I still think they came out of this with a different kind of a win. Everybody has enjoyed watching Fiji play for years. It's always exciting, it's always a thrill seeing them play. But the one thing that was especially impressive was that second half against Wales. It was amazing to actually see how they could turn around that 18-point deficit and come that close to actually causing an upset. The thing that really stood out is you could really see they were far more organized. They were far more disciplined than they've been in previous years. Phase play worked and was up to par, and they were in the game for the whole game. There were phases where they were a little lower, but overall, this is a different kind of Fiji than what we've seen in previous years. On the other hand, you have Wales, and and they actually took a serious beating from the Fijian runners as well as the tacklers, but they stood up bravely to that, time and time again. With a very few chances that were actually presented to the Welsh team, they were able to turn that into points, and that was the differentiating factor for them. Uh, they actually built that win also on some of the most ridiculous defense that I've seen in years. And one of the prime examples is one of the props that went off after 45 minutes. When he came back on, one of the commentators mentioned that he had already made 20 tackles by that time. Making 20 tackles as a prop in 45 minutes, that is massive. The Josh Adams tackle on a rampaging Celestina Ravatamada was just one of the uh, prime examples of exactly the attitude that the whole Welsh team had in this game. And that just brings me lastly to the two refereeing decisions. Now, the referees so far, I honestly think they've really been up to a higher standard, better than previous World Cups overall. The one thing that is just needed is a little bit more consistency in terms of how certain things get adjudicated, in my opinion. The first one that we need to have a look at is the red card that Carey received. If you go strictly according to the rule book, yes, Carey should have gotten that red card. There wasn't mitigating circumstances, but I don't think that is completely fair. I would have thought that there would have been more logic applied to it, and just taking into account that the player uh, was coming down from jumping for a ball when that head-on collision happened. I don't think there was any malicious intent from Carey, so I think that one wasn't ruled correctly. And then if you just have a look at it in the South African game, I only saw the photos afterwards. Didn't see it during the game, but the Jesse Creel situation, he was actually upright in the tackle, and he had a head-on head collision as well. So he should have gotten the same sanction as Carey got. The second incident, however, is from the Wales and Fiji game, and that has been talked about quite a bit since that game finished. On the one hand, Wales kept infringing on their own goal line time and time again, and they were warned time and time again, but it didn't result in uh, yellow cards being issued. The first time that Fiji did the same on their goal line, they got a yellow card immediately. The commentators did say that it looked like a professional foul, and I agree, it was actually a professional foul. But any person who's ever played rugby would know that what the Welsh did on their own line wasn't just a little accidental offside or just an accidental slowing down of the ball. A lot of that was also what I would consider professional foul after professional foul after professional foul. Had these incidents been handled a little differently, things might have turned out a little different in both of the games. England were just superior throughout, so I think they would have been fine, but they might have won by more had there been 15 players on the field. But I think that inspired them to actually play at a different level. On the other side, it might have had an impact on that Welsh and Fiji game, and that might have resulted in Fiji actually coming away with the win. So we'll have to see how that improves, but I'm sure that the refereeing community would be looking at that, they would be considering it, and as a collective, they will work on improving that.